We're going to do two parts today. We're going to do making a puffy pizza dough with no digital scale, breaking all the rules, and then we're going to make a pizza. And I've got some dough sitting, it's been fermenting for 2 days and proofing my container since this morning around 8 a.m., 7:30 maybe. I've made some dough balls, removed this from the fridge, made 2 dough balls, and these have been proofing. You can see they're kind of expanding. They're nice since about 8 o'clock, which is kind of what I recommend, like 4 hours of final proof. It really helps us nail that down. Okay, so let's get into, I'm gonna put this is a name, it's gonna ferment. This is a 24-hour dough, not using equipment. All right, so I'm gonna switch the camera down so you guys can see exactly what I'm doing. That's great, that's fun. Awesome. All right, so I got my bowl here, and I'll answer a bunch of questions for you guys too, but I'm using the central milling flour. I'm using a cup to measure everything. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. This is really rough, but I love this recipe. It's really simple. I use 2 cups of flour. So I just dump them in. I'm kind of using like big scoops of flour, you know, 2 of those. All right. And now what I do, so I'm going to add some sea salt. I add 1 teaspoon of sea salt. Pour that into over my thing here. Leveled, dump it in. Next, what I'll do is I'm going to whisk that stuff together. And if you guys have questions, just save them till like we have a pause, and I'll do what I can to answer all of them. For my yeast, this is an active dry yeast. And you notice I'm not blooming my yeast first. I'm going to dump it right into my bowl. Okay, and then that's 1/4 teaspoon, dump it in. Right. And now I'm going to take my whisk and whisk this again. And this recipe is super simple. And now for the water, I'm going to use 1 cup of water. And I just literally pour my water in. And now I'll take my whisk, and I'll just kind of mix this stuff up. My dough, for some reason, that's a personal preference again. I'll put that back in here. I'll cover this and let it sit out overnight. And that is our dough. It's really that easy. This is a 24-hour dough. I think it's amazing. Now the pizza. All right, let's get back to that. Pizza. I'm gonna go back to top. Oh, so first, my ingredients. My oven's preheating. I've got my cheese pre-grated. So my mise en place, right? All my stuff before I start making things. One thing I don't have is tomatoes or tomato sauce. So I'm going to make my sauce now. Let's show you how I do that. And then we'll have all of my cheese, my tomato sauce, my dough, everything ready to rip. So I can make multiple pizzas if I wanted to. So let's get into the sauce first. And today, Isola, they're Italian. They are whole plum peeled tomatoes. That's it, right? I'm going to take these, I'm going to crush them by my hand. I'm going to add sea salt. That is our tomato sauce. All right, super easy. My recommendation is to try a bunch of different tomatoes. I mean, you can crush them by hand. You can buy them already crushed. I like to try to find tomatoes that have very few ingredients, just like 1 ingredient, like tomatoes. Sometimes they have a little bit of like citric acid to make them kind of stay in this can longer and fresher. Bianco di Napoli makes a nice tomato. There's so many good ones out there. Taste them, and you know, each season they change. So I recommend tasting. So let's make the sauce. I'll show you how I do this. I'm gonna take my tomatoes, just pour them in. All right. Colors beautiful. The smell, the aroma is amazing. And now I'm gonna do is just kind of look at this a little bit. Take my hand and just go in here and just like crush. When I crush, I'm trying to crush it underneath the liquid volume. If you can see what I'm doing, right? So I don't splatter all over the place. And I can crush these as rough as I'd like. Oh, they smell amazing. And I'm starting to get this nice texture in here. Smell those, Coop? Smells good, huh? Crush them. Don't be afraid. Get your hands dirty. Oop, a little squirt there. I'm going to take some sea salt. I can use like 1 heaping teaspoon of sea salt here. Oops, that's probably a lot. A little heavy. All I'll do is just kind of mix this up by hand. I've got pre-shredded cheese, right? And now I'm going to take, I've got some fresh mozzarella cheese, and I have my dough. Let's take a pause again. These individual strands of cheese, if you buy it pre-shredded, are coated with like a starch, and they tend to brown very easy. So what we do is we buy a chunk of cheese, like a low moisture whole milk mozzarella is great. And we shred it ourselves, and that gives you these really nice, they won't brown too quick. And then what I've done is I've taken this cheese and I put it in the fridge, like a half hour ago before classes started, just to get this cheese nice and cold. It'll just slow the cooking process down, micro a little bit, enough where it'll brown like beautifully on the pizza. I've got my tomatoes. I've also got some whole milk mozzarella, which I'll break off by hand, just to give the cheese, I have a couple of different cheeses. They melt similarly awesome, a little bit different color contrast too. All right, got my peel. I like a wooden peel. There's metal, there's wood. The reason we like wood is that it absorbs some of the moisture. I have flour and semolina flour. I'm going to lightly dust my peel. Okay. Lightly dust it. Those are like my ball bearings. And now let's set this aside. You can see I've got a nice cut right down into flour. And now what I'll do is just pick this up, right? Both sides. That beautiful. And now what I'll do is I'm going to take my fingers, just lightly press it. And I want to keep picking this up so it does not stick. Don't want this sticking to the counter. Just press it out like a cloud. If it gets a little sticky, I'm gonna put a little semolina flour on top just to help it not stick to my fingers. I'm just kind of lightly pressing. This is about a 270 gram dough ball. And I'm kind of making, people will do this around the perimeter, or they'll completely flatten it. And really there's no right or wrong answer. I just kind of like working on the counter until it gets to be about this size, about 7 or 8 inches. And I'm going to pick it up, put it in the back of my knuckles, and then like my hands are like this inside, and I'm letting gravity do all its thing here. And then when it hits to be about 10 inches, you can see, isn't that pretty? It's gorgeous, right? I'll take my peel and I'm going to slide my dough on top. Just scrape up underneath it. Just so I don't make a big mess. And slide my peel around. Isn't that beautiful? Right? I like the air bubbles coming in. And I might want to pinch these edges a little bit, just to give it a little texture. And before I do anything else, before I do sauce or cheese, I want to make sure this thing's going to slide. It's sliding like a puck. So we're in the driver's seat, which is amazing. I want to get a little bit bigger I can. Most important thing I can say is we want to make sure this is sliding like a puck before I do sauce, before I do cheese. If something gets stuck, I want to pick up that area, just slide a little bit of flour or semolina flour underneath it to unstick it. And now again, it's still sliding. Gorgeous, right? Now let's grab some sauce on my pizza, right? These are the crushed tomatoes. So I still have some chunks, which I love. I want to bring my sauce close to the edge, but not over the edge, just like life. So I don't have a lot here, right? Gorgeous, isn't it? Gorgeous. That's probably a little heavy, huh? I always say less is more on top. And I've spilled a little sauce on my peel, so I want to be really careful that I get that off of there, because that will tend to make my dough stick. So if that's the case, let's stick a little more semolina flour in there. We're good, right? But awesome. Now for the cheese. Smelling like pizza. And I'll take some of the fresh mozzarella. I'll break this off by hand. Just put some pieces in here. Again, this just adds a little bit of dimension to it. Some different flavors in the cheese, some different colors, right? That's it, guys. So I'll make sure my board's kind of clean here. I want to give us a little jiggle before I go back into the oven. Still sliding like a puck. Awesome. So now it's ready to rock and roll inside the oven. So let's get back to this for a second. Preheat at 450 versus 500 is because I want that electric oven to be tricked out that's not too hot to turn the broiler on. So now I've done that. It's preheated at 450. I turn the broiler on. And that's going to go on and literally it'll cycle on within like a minute every time. It's amazing. And so broiler's on, my pizza's ready to launch. It's intimidating, especially in the first part, but the back of my peel go to the back of my steel. I'm going to use this, but I'm going to try to, this sounds great. Can you see okay? Yeah, I'll slide out my rack. And I'll take the back of my steel, goes to the back of my peel, goes to the back of my steel, and I kind of shake it off. It's like that. Boom, I close it up. You can see inside, my broiler is on. You see that broiler kicking in? So let's get that oven closed quick. 2 minutes under the broiler. After 2 minutes, I might peek and give it a little spin so it doesn't get too dark on top and kind of even. I want even browning if I can. I find 2 minutes to be ideal in this oven. Every oven's different. Learn the cycle, etc. Does it take 1 hour for the steel to come to temp, and does it need to be at that temp for a certain amount of time before putting a pizza on the steel? Really good question. I like 1 hour, and that's from like the time I turn it on, which is at 0, to an hour from now, or from the time I hit go. It'll take an hour to preheat to 500 degrees. My oven will get there in like 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I want the steel in there for a full hour to get really to suck all of that heat in there. It does make a difference. So I like as much heat as I can in there for sure. What is the grated cheese mixture? It's just a low moisture mozzarella. That's been 1 minute. So let's take a look. I'm going to show you guys. So bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to show you guys inside the oven exactly what I'm looking at for this. Okay, so it's been 1 minute. Let's open it up. You can see, right? It's starting to get some color. I might just rotate that a little bit, just like that. Okay, close it up and give it, another 30 seconds or so. And then after that amount of time, what I'll probably do is I'll turn the broiler off. In fact, I could probably turn the broiler off now. It's almost been a full 2 minutes. The only difference here is when I'm doing this like with friends and family is I'm working faster when I'm by myself. I'm not leaving my oven door open as long because all that heat is essentially escaping. let's just take a quick picture. Okay. Yeah, it's good. Awesome. And close it up, and then turn the broiler off. Big. I'm gonna put my oven back on 500. Broiler is now off. I'll put 2 more minutes on. Broiler's on. I put 2 more minutes on, so that'll be approximately a 4 or 5 minute pizza, which is unbelievably fast in a home oven. It's going to be just gorgeous. Smells amazing. What is the grated cheese? Make sure, do you ever use rice flour on the peel? I have used rice flour. It's amazing. It works great. I typically just have semolina flour and flour. In fact, I keep these like deli things, like these little glass containers in my cabinets. One has semolina flour in it, and this one has flour in it. So I always have those available. So that's why, and that's, the flour is the same flour that I use in my dough. So always around. And what is the secret to a tender crust? The secret to a tender crust, really good question, is a good flour, a good fermentation, and then a fast bake. I'm baking this in like 4 or 5 minutes. You can do 6 or 7 minutes also. And cooking it fast is what really sears the outside of the crust, and on the inside, it's gonna be like this light and airy dough. But I really did the fundamental things really well. I fermented my dough for 24 hours. I use really nice ingredients. This morning, I took that dough and I made my dough balls, and I let those dough balls proof for at least 4 hours. Sometimes 5 is fine too, depending on the time of year, but minimum of 4 hours. What that does allows the dough to start trying to expand. We make the dough balls to keep all the gases, the natural gases inside. And now as it tries to expand out, because we've trapped them, that's what's creating some of these air pockets inside the dough. And then that's what really helps create a beautiful crust. And now I've got my baking steel working its magic in my home oven at 500 degrees. And the result is just, pizzeria quality pizza, better than pizzeria quality pizza at home. And that's what makes it amazing. Did I answer that? Let's take another peek. So it's been 4 minutes. Ooh, shit. The broiler didn't go off. So what I've got is, I'm gonna take it out, is a crust that's gonna be kind of dark, but I'm gonna show you guys a picture of this here. Let's go top down again. You guys can see. So here's our color. Look at that. Isn't that awesome? So it's a little crispy, right? Nice. Isn't that pretty? It's gorgeous, right? And then let's take a look underneath. You guys can see, like underneath the crust, which is also amazing. It's awesome. It's a little bit, maybe a little bit on the dark side. I probably could have shut the broiler down faster, but the pizza does look pretty good. You can see the cheese, the way the cheese, I've got a couple of different colors with the cheese. You can see the fresh mozzarella here, blended in with the low moisture mozzarella. So you got a couple of different texture cheeses inside, which gives it really nice color and good flavor as well, not just for show. We got a beautiful crust, crispy, maybe a little dark, but really nice. Let's go back here. Cool, isn't that nice? See here, right? It's beautiful. Maybe a little bit dark, and that's because I had the broiler on maybe a little bit too long. Again, not as dialed in as I would be if I wasn't on camera, but it's still amazing. Looks great. Crust. So really that's it. Like you could see, like this pizza is pretty, I mean, I could probably go in there for another minute in the bottom, make it 4 or 5. I got a lot of sauce on here. That's pretty crispy, right? Quick bake, 5 minutes, pretty awesome. How long do you cook it when using the gas grill? Whew, that's a good question. A different animal. If I'm going to do it traditionally on a steel on the grates. I will keep my temperature around 400 degrees, 350 to 400. You don't need to preheat for an hour because the steel will get too hot. So just be mindful of that. And those lids aren't great for making pizza. They don't really contain the heat as well as a home oven would. So just be mindful of that, but start it low. A lot of people will burn the bottoms because they get the grill too hot, and not realizing the steel is what transfers the energy so fast. So you just got to be really careful with that. Can you make this dough recipe into a thin crust? Yes, great question. Can I make this dough recipe into a thin crust pizza? And the answer is yes. This is about a 270 gram dough ball. I would just make it 150 and then just roll it out flat and get rid of the air bubbles. And that will make it thin, crispy, and awesome. I'm using it. Yeah, got into it too. I'm making this into a, I can do another pizza for that. I'll do another one. I want to heat up a little bit more on the bottom. What was that question? Sorry, I got distracted there. Sorry, guys. Can you make this dough? Oh, in a thin crust. Yeah, so thin, crispy, and awesome. I hope. And my peel size is a 14-inch peel. So you can see this, and then my pizza, again, it's probably about like a 10-inch, 11-inch pizza. So I've got plenty of room in there. I use the 14-inch peel almost exclusively. I use 2 original steels, 14-inch, 16-inch peel is amazing, but I've got, if I'm using the Pro, just 16-inch steel, making 16-inch pizzas, it's a beast. It takes some massive skill to learn to launch and make and stretch. In fact, everything's different and bigger with that. It's great. It's a good experience too. So yeah, most pizza peels are 14 inches off the shelf. We make a 14 and a 16. You change the temp to bake after 2 minutes. Okay, so you change this temperature to bake after 2 minutes. Correct. So I preheat for an hour. Right before I launch it in, I switch my oven to broil. And then after 2 minutes, I switch my oven back off of broil to convection bake. I probably should have switched it maybe at 90 seconds. It wouldn't have been as dark, but I kind of like it. Everyone's unique. I hope that answers that. Why do you use the broiler at the beginning cook instead of at the end? Well, that's a really good question. And when I first started doing this, I would use the broiler at the end. Our friend Chris Bianco, if you know Mr. Bianco, Pizzeria in Arizona, legend. He had a steel and he introduced this to me. And he said, you know what, if you blast that broiler on before you launch, your steel's even hotter. So you're going to create even more oven spring in that dough, like this puff, like you can see these, like that dough springs off, puffy pizza with that additional heat. So we do it first. And then what we do is we turn it down. I hope that answers that. Any other questions, you guys? I can't wait to dig in here. Just one slice rule though, gotta be careful. Awesome. Thank you guys for being here. It's been really fun. This pizza looks great. Next week we're doing breads. So simple breads again. Might even do like a puffy bread, who knows? It'd be really fun to do. You guys are amazing. Thanks for being here. If you have any questions, just email me. Just email me on the any questions you have. We'll do a follow-up to this class tomorrow or Friday with all the details. So again, hit me up anytime. I love the pizza questions. Do you use that? Yeah, okay, that's a great question. I want to get to this one too. I use the lower steel? Yes, I almost use it 100% of the time. And I'm gonna tell you why. I have, if I'm making multiple pizzas. Remember how I use the broiler for the first 2 minutes? Well, if I'm making, say, 2 or 3 pizzas in a session, after 2 minutes, I'm going to take that top pizza and put it on the bottom steel and then launch a new one on the top steel. And every 2 minutes thereafter, I'm essentially rotating and removing, which is incredibly fast. So I can make multiple pizzas in a session. So if I'm making pizzas for, like 10 people, I can crank them out, really crank them out with 2 steels in there. That's the reason. But if I'm making 1 or 2 pizzas, I don't really need to. No, not at All right, you guys? Your recipe with 1 cup of flour. Your recipe with 1 cup of flour was that with each of the balls were in the tub. So this recipe I did today is the puffy pizza recipe. It was actually 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of yeast, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1/4 teaspoon of active dry yeast. And again, that'll be in the follow-up too. And then would you like to convection bake? Oh, yeah. So after I use the boiler for 2 minutes, I switch the oven. I do physically go in and I switch the oven back to bake. And I was a little long on this one, but I will maneuver my oven. I will switch it back and forth, all constantly, especially if I'm making multiple pizzas. So I definitely, yeah, I will go back and forth. Don't be afraid of that. All right, you guys, amazing. Thank you for being here. Email me anytime. Follow us on Instagram. Tag us if you make pizzas. Tell your friends. All right. Thank you, guys.